we're going to have a quick look at 3D camera tracking in Adobe After Effects. I'm going to quickly just reset my workspace, window, workspace, and reset. That's just going to get me back to the default, so we're all on the same page when we start. We are going to use some footage in here. I have some footage of a street in Mexico, but please feel free to dig around, find your own footage, preferably from your own projects, and have a go at tracking this. You'll notice this is a nice clean bit of movement here. There's no cars or anything cutting across. It's going to cut our vision, objects cutting in front of it. It's going to allow for hopefully a nice clean track from there. In After Effects, we can build our new composition by going new composition from footage if you haven't got something already open, or you can go to File, Import File, go that way. But for me, I am going to just drag that video into my project window here. There it is there, and I'm going to create a new composition from that. So with that selected, I can either click this shiny little composition button here. It says create new composition. I can drag that into that new composition, and if you do not have a composition already going with the timeline here, you can simply drag that into the area down here, and it will create that based on the scale, duration, everything else of that video. Awesome. Let's add a 3D tracker. So there's a couple ways of doing this. One way is to just simply right click on your selected layer here and go to track and stabilize and track camera. That will definitely do it. But what I like to do is jump into my window and turn on tracker. So that's going to actually open up here on the right. I've maximized my screen, so a lot of this, it's all kind of bunched down the bottom here. Now you can turn these off. So paragraph, for example, I'm going to click on these little three bars here and go close panel. The other way of doing this is to go to window, and you can see everything ticked on is what I have. So I don't want to see the characters at the moment. I will probably later. Preview, I don't need that. Tools, whatever. So now I can, I'm getting close to actually be able to see my tracker options here. You can also simply just click on those to reduce it. So just trying to minimize my workspace. Alright, very simple. All we do is we hit the track camera button. This can take a few moments depending on the resolution and duration and other technical stuff, but if you do have a look over here in our control panel, you can actually see this is ticking away, and time remaining about 24 seconds. If you are working on a VFX shot, really what you want to be doing in After Effects is just focusing on that shot. So try and trim down anything that you've got, from when the director says action, any sort of thing after. If you've got a 5-minute bit of messing around for only 3 seconds worth of VFX, trim down that three seconds. It's going to save you some time. Alright, here's our camera tracker. It is an effect, so it means we can access it at any point that we need to. Cool. So as we move over, we can see this little target system starts jumping around. So I've obviously got the move tool selected. I'm just going to maximize here. Actually, sorry, I just realized I turned off my tools. I do want to see those. And let's maximize that. And I've got my move tool selected, and you can see I'll bring up this target. So it really depends. Try and make this relevant to where you want to place your objects. So in this case, I want to put something on the roller door here. So I'm going to zoom in just a little bit, hold down that space bar to bring up the hand tool, and it's going to triangulate between 3 points. So you want to get something that's going to be relative to the perspective that you are looking for, and you might not always find it straight away. Sometimes you just hit the right spot and it's just perfect. Other times it really does take a while to play around. Now if you're still not getting what you want, just click on 3 of those, hold down your shift key, and then start clicking around, see if you can add some points for that. Now I've accidentally unclicked. If it's still getting too tricky, my other suggestion is just scrub forwards a bit or backwards and see if you can find a better track point. Alright, for me that's not too bad. That's kind of getting the right perspective and roughly the right area that I want. Alright, so I've clicked in that and I'm happy with that for now. I'm going to right click in there, and in this case I want to put an image on this door. So I'm going to go right click, create solid and camera, and there it is there. And it's created a solid, and in this case it's just a red. It doesn't really matter what color it is. And you can rotate this because it's now brought in as a 3D object. So you can see that little cube there, which means you can rotate it, but I kind of want to keep it in the position that that little marker has, and just scrub through it, just make sure it's kind of looking like it's in play correctly, and that is kind of working right there. Now we're not actually going to that red square is not really too exciting for us, so let's add some extra things to it. So I'm going to right click on this red square, this track solid one here, and I'm going to pre-compose it. So right click, pre-compose, give it a name that's meaningful. So something like roller door, and let's call it roller door track, whatever you want to call, and hit OK. This has now converted this into a composition. So if I go switch back to my project window, we'll see we have, here's our street in Mexico composition. That's this one that we're currently working on. And roller door track is also a composition. Cool. Now if I double click on the composition that I've just made, there it is, my amazing red square. Damn, I'm good. Yours might be a different color, that's fine. Let's add an image here. So I've got a few images that you can deal with, and I'm just going to drag and drop. This is a PNG image, which means it's got a transparent background, which is kind of funky, and I'm going to turn off the visibility of the background. So it looks like it's black there, but it's actually transparent. If we switch back to our Mexico City one, you can see that that image is now, bang, there it is. Cool. Now, important thing to know is just anything you do inside this composition will be transferred back to the other composition. So even if you wanted to add something really wacky, so I'm going to actually add a video to this, which is just totally weird, but even so, that is also, as you can see, that is now also tracking, and we've got that little video projection on there. So you can see how kind of you can do some funky things like Blade Runner with motion graphics and animations and video and stuff being projected on walls. But jumping back in there, I'm going to keep this simple. Let's just get it back down to this character here. Cool. Back to Street City. I'm going to do something. I'm just going to scale this up. So I'm scaling. I'm holding down Shift. I really don't want to warp this too much. It's going to mess up my perspective a little bit. So I'm going to hold down Shift and scale this up just for the hell of it. And I'm also going to move this. So we do have this gimbal that's going to allow us to move X, Y, and Z, like so. And you can also hit S for scale if you wish, or P for position, and it's going to allow you to just manually drag through. So sometimes the gimbal is a bit difficult to sort of play around with, and also R for rotation if you need to rotate stuff. So you could also animate that rotating or popping out, whatever you want. Alright, so there it is, and it looks pretty good. Big issue that I've got is this little box here is cutting, should be in front, so it's supposed to be an object in front, so it's really not selling my animation here. It looks like it's pretty much in the right position, but obviously the parallax is causing it to cut in front there. So I'm going to show you this relatively quickly, and if you do want to get into this kind of stuff, I do recommend you see some more advanced tutorials for that. But we're going to rotoscope this. It's if you don't know what rotoscoping is, basically it's cutting out and hiding elements that you do or don't want to see. And we're going to do this with the street scene. Now specifically, I want to have this box here cut out and put on its own layer in front of everything else, and then also have the video of the rest of it behind. So it's essentially going to create a sandwich. It's going to have the street scene as is, and then it's going to have this layer here, and then it's also going to have this box on the layer on top. So to do that, I'm going to grab the street scene here. I'm going to go Command or Control D to duplicate, and I'm going to drag that to the top here. So, oh no, it's hiding my image. Don't stress it. You need to open this layer by itself in order to get the rotor brush to work properly. So if I grab the rotor brush and click on that, nothing really happens, but if you double click on that layer, it opens up in its own panel, and now you can see the rotor brush. So I select it up here, little dude with a paintbrush, and I've got a little paintbrush. So I'm going to use that Shift key, and essentially green is what you want to keep. So if I just do a really quick paint over this, you can see it does a fairly good job. If it goes outside the lines, you can hold down the Alt key or the Option key, and you can start subtracting that. Now, if I look over here on the left, I've got my camera tracker, which is there by itself anyway. There's my rotor brush option. So there is a feather option. You can get into a lot of detail for this, but the key one is just green's going to paint in what you want. Alt or the Option key is going to subtract areas that you want to remove. You can adjust your brush size as well if you hit the Command or Control key and then left click and drag. You can see I can adjust my brush size there as well. Now, if you can't sort of really fathom what's going on here, there's a few view options down the bottom here where you can toggle alpha channel, being able to see just that purple line outline. We've also got another one which has got the red background, so you can kind of see what you are currently selecting. So whatever works for you, I'm going to go with this one here. I find that works pretty well. And then what you want to do is kind of just shuffle forwards a little bit. It will take some time to process, but you kind of want to just check that it is rotoscoping correctly. And I'm pretty confident with this one. I'm going to scrub back, and you see it needs to process. You can see this green bar here is saying, yeah, we've processed along there. And this is where a reasonably good computer is going to help you out quite a bit, because it's going to speed up this kind of stuff. Now, kind of annoying thing that happens with this as well is that rotor brushes tend to sort of jump in and out of rendering. So basically they kind of get quite excited and they'll just keep chugging along as far as trying to render. So this one's fairly easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit this little freeze button over here, and it's going to take a few moments. It's basically going to tick through those frames, and it's going to freeze that rotor brush in, which means that it's not going to keep trying to figure out the calculations of where that is. So it's designed to be semi-automatic, so if you've got someone who's waving or something, it tries to track it as best you can, and then you do a little bit of finessing manually as well. So a bit of both while that goes. And unfortunately this is not too complex for it. Actually, now if I do need to do anything else, it will unfreeze it, but I do not want to do that. So let's go back to our composition up the top here, and a bit of a weird thing happening there. Let's see what's happening here. That's very strange. I'm not actually sure why that is happening. Let's see if I can find out what's happening on here. I do love a good glitch. Here we go. So I was just wondering what's happening here. I've accidentally moved my starting position for my rotor brush layout all the way to here. Don't know why, but you may have seen me doing it, so I'm just going to move that to the beginning so they're both at the same time. So now it should look almost identical. As we move that rotor brush over, you can see that it is now, that layer is now covering the image here, and behind that is the background. So we got background, image, and our rotoscope. This one needs a little bit of finessing here. You could probably just add a little bit of a blur, or sorry, a feather to the rotor brush. That might help a little bit, and play around with that. But I really don't want to mess around with it because it does take a bit of time for that to happen. But there you go. A simple rotor brush for that is going to help us play with that. Alright, let's look at some other methods of tracking. So I'm going to go back to my background streetscape. I might just delete, actually, you know what, let's leave those. I was going to say leave those. I'm going to go to my OG, my original background plate here, and I'm going to go and click on, in the effects panel, the 3D camera tracker. So it's going to bring that back. So let's have a look at adding some text to this instead. So grab my move tool again, and I'm going to just add some text to the street here. So I'm going to just scrub to, let's go to a reasonable point over here at the beginning, and let's pop it here. So that looks pretty good, just those 3 points. And then I'm going to add some text. I'm simply going to right click and go create text. So here's the text. It's created a new layer, it's simply called text, and just check it's actually tracking. Yes, it is. Awesome. So now I can select that text and I can rotate it and try and get it into an upright position. So again, I'm just using that little gimbal there. If not, you can press the letter R and change the orientation as well, and see if we can get this working for us. Likewise, if you need to change the scale or anything like that, you can. Also, if you turn on your character panel, which I think I just turned off. Alright, let's go back to character. There it is down there. Obviously, you've also got your font size and all your different fonts. Hooray! Let's get something a little bit more exciting. As you cycle through these. There we go. That's kind of weird and usable. So character, and you can change your text color and all the rest of it. I think it's a bit more subtle like that. And of course, any of these you can obviously animate. So here's my text here, and I can also animate position, scale, rotation, all the rest of it. I'm going to leave that as is for now. And what I'm going to also want to do is show you a couple of options what you can additionally do to this text. So it's going to get a little bit weird for now. I'm just going to rotate this a bit more. You do have the option, the two options I'm going to mention is adding a 3D bevel to this, sort of bringing out the depth of this, and see how that looks. To do this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the text drop down. There it is here, and over here it says geometry options, and by default that's going to be grayed out, so I actually don't have any options at the moment. But if I go to change renderer, and I'm going to change it from classic 3D to cinema 4D. Now this is the old school, there is Mercury 3D yet in there as well, but let's switch it to cinema 4D and hit OK. Now this is very likely to be updated very soon, so which is why I'm like, just let's see what happens. So geometry options is now available, and now what I can do is go to extrusion depth, and you can see it actually adds a bit of an extrusion to this. So it looks a bit weird, and the reason why it looks weird is I actually don't have any lighting on this at the moment. So what I can do with that is go to layer, new, and light. In this case I'm going to do a spotlight, or you could try parallel light, but I'm just going to add maybe a nice little warm glow for this light, and let's hit OK. And with the parallel light, basically it's a directional light, and it means that we can see if we can rotate this a little bit. It does take a little bit of messing around with it. So let's go point of interest. So you can see you can kind of move that around like so, and it is going to affect where the lighting is in your image. So it's kind of cool. The downside of this is, and you do have a bunch of other options in here. You can change the fall off and the intensity and all that kind of stuff. So there's a lot you can play in here. Parallel lights or spotlights is always fun as well. So layer, new, light. Let's do a spotlight in this case. And again, it's just about getting that position to work for you. You've got this little area of interest, and you can change the fall off and all that kind of stuff. So of course, lighting you can animate. Create a 3D shadow for this kind of stuff. One of the things you might want to try is duplicating that layer and then lowering it, and then maybe playing around with the rotation, potentially also jumping into geometry options and dropping down the extrusion depth, because obviously it's it's more of a flat object now, and see if you get a shadow that kind of matches to that, and that should also track at the same time as your object. Let's see if we can actually attach something to that. So what you may find is if we do try and play around with some of the color correction, let's jump into, say, let's go to let's go to tint, and we try and change the colors of that. you'll note it's not actually adding any change to that text. So it's not really quite being affected by any of the effects or layer styles or anything like that. So here's a little trick that you might want to try. In this case, I'm going to go layer, new, solid. I'm going to set the color to black. I'm just going to create a big black rectangle like that. And then I'm going to go to track matte. Here it is here. And if you don't see this, remember you can adjust what you can see and can't see over here. So there's my T-Mac or track matte, and I'm going to link that to that text 3 layer. So that now becomes that big black rectangle is now only going to be visible where that other layer is, like so, and by default it's going to turn that text off. And then I'm just going to go and let's potentially change the blend mode or that, but I'm just going to go transparency or let it, opacity and change letter T. Let's lower the opacity of that a little bit. You may want to add a blur to that or something like that, and scale that out or something like that. So actually we don't want to scale that, we actually want to scale text 3 because that's what it's referencing. So something like that. Let's see if we can add a blur to this. Gaussian blur, and remember that's referencing text number 3. So push out a nice big blur on that, and that is one way. So there's always different ways to try and skin a cat in After Effects. If you can't get what you want, then you just got to kind of think ahead. Now, as I'm doing this, you can see it's really slowing down my render times. It's just kind of clunking along. So 3D text is a possibility on this. And After Effects has recently introduced a bunch of 3D features, which is really cool. But I'm actually going to just delete those texts for now, and the shadow and the mask. So while I'm here, I may as well delete the spotlight as well. And all I'm left with now is my rotoscope box here, the roller door image, my camera tracker, which you can't see anything of, and the background scene. Cool, so let's add text a different way and see if we can actually have some shadows to this. So I'm going to select my street background here, go 3D camera tracker, find a good track point, that looks good, right click and create text. There is some text up the top here. Once again, we just need to rotate it, put it into position however we want it. That will do for now. Again, change your fonts, play around with it, and let's add a shadow. So I'm going to switch from Cinema 4D mode over here to Classic 3D. So you got the little drop down, you can access that now. And I'm going to go back to my background plate, back to my camera tracker. Let's go to roughly about the same place here, and then right click and create shadow catcher and light. So it has created a shadow catcher. Here it is here. I'm just going to make sure it's there, and I've got a light source here as well. Now I can't really see where my light source is at the moment, so I'm actually going to delete that. You can see it is affecting some of my stuff here, and you could potentially jump into transform and then try and figure that out, but it's probably hidden really far away. So I'm actually going to delete that one. You'll notice my little background image has disappeared, but I'm going to go layer, new, light. I'm going to play around with the spotlight again. Again, I usually add a little bit of color just to help me identify where it is. You can always change that later. And here it is now. I can actually see where my light source is, and I can start moving that around, zoom in and zoom out. If you really need to, you can switch over to different views here, so you can go to top view and stuff like that. But I'm just going to move this around until I can get something that's going to work. And if you unclick, it's kind of annoying, but sometimes this can be a little bit finicky, to say the least. Advanced ways of doing this as well is to create a null object that your camera is parented to. And I can just kind of see that's kind of working now. It's just popping in there. So that is actually working, and you can actually, if you do have 3D objects, you can run around with that. But what I've got, if you can see there, is that shadow catcher is quite small. It's just this little rectangle here, and you can just see that shadow starting to pop in at the base. So what I'm going to do with that is just go S for scale, and I am going to scale this sucker up. Boom. It's fairly large. You can also just manually start dragging that out, but basically I want to make sure that it is got my text there, and that text is dropping that shadow. It's catching that shadow, and it's going to be based on where my shadow catcher layer is and also where my spotlight is. So if I jump into my spotlight, I'm going to hit orientation. You can see I can start actually animating where that is. I can go P for position, and let's, that's all going to be affected by my lighting and all the rest of it. So awesome. So if that's working for you, fantastic. Once again, you could maybe try and add a little bit of a blur to this kind of stuff if that works. It may actually not work too well because this is actually a shadow, so you probably need to play around rather with the spotlight light options, things like fall off and intensity and shadow darkness and shadow diffusion and stuff like that. So that'll actually allow you to play around with your blurriness. But that way we've got this shadow, it's actually interacting, and it's going to be based on that text. So again, if you add anything to the text, it will animate, which is kind of cool. So let's do something a little bit different. And always be aware that you can still keep animating as far as you want to go. Do consider maybe adding some animation to your text as required, so you could do some transitions and stuff like that. If you jump into your text layer, you'll see you have this animate option, which will allow you to do things like character offset, which will allow you to do things like cycle through letters and all this kind of stuff. So there's so many options for this. Let's get that back down to 0, and we'll animate that. So it's going to just do a weird cycle through our letters, and you'll notice that shadow is changing as well, which is exactly what we want to happen if we're going to do something that's going to be semi-believable for our animation. So do have a play around with that. Here's another one that could be a fun one to play with. I'm just going to type in the word glitch to my options effects here, and I'm going to go VR digital glitch. Let's add that to the text and see what we get. And we get this kind of weird glitching effect, and don't forget to animate it. So let's have a look. Distortion, noise, random seed. That's going to allow you to animate this. You could change a bunch of options with this, but let's just punch up some randomness to this just so it looks like it's glitching out. And then of course you also have your blend mode, so let's send that to multiply, for example, overlay or something like that. So you can really play around with some funky effects, and I'm really pushing it to be a little bit weird, but that's kind of the point. See what you can get away with. Add effects, take them away, and hopefully you'll get something good. All right, have a go with that and enjoy, and we'll catch you on the next one.